Our next comment on the readiness, potential, and free will video is from SNGS. And he asks, what does Tom say about horrifically high entropy IUOCs, like serial killers, for example, who would do these various things, or mass murderers like Hitler, Stalin? Are they allowed to just re enter this game and continue on with terrorizing of humanity?
Well, uh, yes and no. You've got a couple assumptions in there in that question. There's three or four assumptions that go with it that aren't necessarily the way it is. And that is, all right, let's say you get some people who are really demented and they do horrible things, kill a lot of people. Maybe they torture their own children. Who knows? There's some really strange, demented people out here in our 8 billion humans. There's some tiny fraction of them that are very violent and uh, totally controlled and wrapped up in their fear. So what happens when they die? Okay, well, the system doesn't punish because there's no value in that. What the system does is it wants to have that entity turn around and start making better choices. That's what they want. Okay. So what they're going to do, besides showing that person, like we just talked about, some of the past, that what's gone on because of them, all the high entropy, terrible things that resulted because of their ideas. And you could also show them some of the probable future of their concept of let's say with Hitler, a pure Aryan race, that would not have turned out to be all that good. That would have ended up a mistake and would have had a lot of negative consequences. So you could point out even the things that they thought would have been good things that they were willing to do all these horrible things to bring about really wouldn't be a good thing after all. If you have that much sameness, you lose lots of opportunity to grow. Sameness doesn't create opportunity to grow. Variation does. Differences do. Um, Sameness creates ruts that you get into. It inhibits your ability to grow and think. So anyhow, so he may be giving those kinds of instructions that what you were willing to sacrifice in order to get something you thought was much better really isn't better. It's worse. It's worse than what you've got. Matter of fact, what you started with was just about optimum for future. The probabilities are just about optimum, just the way it was. And so he'll give them that. And then they'll probably put them in the next lifetime. They'll probably say, well, here's a good next lifetime for you. And they will give them a lifetime where it is very improbable that they will have much power. It's very improbable that they will be able to affect a whole lot of people. Maybe they are just in a small tribe someplace in the jungle somewhere. There's lots of places where the people there really aren't likely to be up doing things that move and shake in the world, right? And you might just do that and make it something fairly easy for them. They don't have a lot of really hard choices. And then let them see how they do with that. And if they don't do very well with that, then you have to give them something even easier. And you keep giving them things easier until they get something that they can succeed at. It's sort of like the parent who gives his 6-year-old a basketball. Well, the 6-year-old doesn't have enough muscle to throw a basketball up high enough to make it in the basket. So you take the basket and you put it down low so that they actually can succeed. And then as they get a little stronger and get a little bigger, you keep moving the basket up until it gets to regulation height by the time they're old enough to deal with that. And that way, they have successes to build on, not just failures. So that's the idea. So you put them in a situation where they are likely to succeed, and then you build on that success. Then you put them something that's maybe got a little more challenge and succeed. And pretty soon you have them maybe through 10 or 50 or 100 lifetimes, who knows, whatever it takes. They'll be back to the point where they're productive citizens and they are, you know, working their way to lowering their entropy, and they're back in the game in a protective sense. So it's not like, oh, this evil person, they're so evil. They're going to be evil for all the rest of their existence and all their lifetimes. They're going to be this evil person. It's not like that. It's mostly, evil's mostly just a lot of fear. So if you can put them in a place that's not so scary, an easy place where it's not too hard, those fears tend to dissipate and they go away because there's nothing there to kind of torque them up. What happens to a person that ends up some kind of a homicidal maniac or a serial killer is those fears start to get twisted and they start feeling not only negative about themselves, but negative about their environment and other people and the world, and all that spirals down to where there's nothing left in them other than this desire to make a difference by hurting. You know, they almost define themselves by the hurt that they can cause. So you get this sick person. You take them out of that environment and put them in a different environment, and they don't necessarily want to kill everybody in this different environment because they're not in that. They didn't go through the sequence of events that triggered all those fears and made them worse. So it's not that difficult for the system to rehabilitate.
Well, Tom,
Okay,
you say that you carry with you the quality that you have come in with.
right.
Would you say that there are rare cases of entities that continue to make not good choices and spiral downwards to the point of the system having to delete them?
I suspect that's possible. I don't have personal experience of such entities, but I expect that's possible. If there's an entity that refuses to evolve or grow, and at that point, then that entity is not valuable in the system. I'd say it just gets deleted. It was, you know, it's past the point of being rehabilitated, and it just simply the system would delete it, say, gone.
I see that as far greater of a downside than the concept of punishment.
You know,
That's a
th-
complete erasure
yeah,
of the being.
Yeah, but I hate to talk about that, or I don't like talking about that because there'll be a lot of people out there that'll hear that and say, "Uh-oh, I wonder if I'm going to get deleted because I'm so awful." And it's like, no, it's it would be a very, very rare
Very rare.
circumstance that any of the 8 billion people would get deleted.
It's a benevolent being who will
Yeah.
allow the person a gentler lifetime in order to build up that good
Well,
choice.
the negativity in such people because of the experiences that they've had, because of what they come in with, because of the experiences they've had, that negativity gets wound up tighter and tighter and tighter and gets more and more in charge of the choices. And that just builds up in this particular lifetime because of circumstances. Okay, now you take that person, take them out of those circumstances. They don't necessarily, wake up in another reality and say, oh, I want to kill everybody, that's not necessarily who they are. That's just what they turned into in this particular lifetime, you see. So when they start, once that's gone, and they start over in another lifetime, particularly in an easier one where they're in a functional family, where there's lots of love and caring and interactions are positive, you see, then they don't have that thing that downward spirals them into desperation and great negativity and mass murder. that just doesn't come out because that's not really who they are. It's just who they became in that particular lifetime. You don't necessarily repeat everything you've done here, you just don't repeat it again. All right, they probably did de-evolve some. So they de-evolved because of that. But the de-evolution that they had was mostly local to that particular experience, not necessarily their potential didn't de-evolve so much. It probably did a little bit because they did some nasty things. So that potential may have de-evolved. So they have to work themselves out of that hole. But it's not a huge hole. It's not like they dropped to the, to the bottom of existence and now, everything is going to be ugly. Well, it's not necessarily like that. You give them another situation where positive things happen, where their brain chemistry wasn't screwed up, like it was in this time, where their circumstances were more supportive, and they may turn out to be just a very nice person. You see, so just because you've got, a Hitler over here doesn't mean that it's a damaged psyche that's going to stay damaged. That was an assumption. Remember, I started out saying this fella had some assumptions that weren't true. Well, that's one of the assumptions that just isn't true. It's not like that. A lot of it has to do with things that happened here. They got wrapped up around power. Okay, that's an ego thing. Power, want more power. Oh, I want to run everything. And if I could run everything, here are the things that I would do. And you know what creates power locally in our culture? Fear. So if everybody fears you, you're very powerful. So that's you're the bully. You're the biggest bully, so you get to be on the top of the hill. That's what that's the way our world works. But that's not necessarily you at a deep level. It's just what you've done here in this. Definitely is what you're capable of because you did it in this lifetime. But it doesn't mean you're going to do it in the next lifetime or the one after that. So the system looks at you and they probably say, well, strike one, let's see what you do. Oh, strike two, strike three, you're out. Now we're going to have to put you in rehabilitation. We're going to have to give you something easier, and we're going to have to build you back up to where you climb out of that hole that you've created for yourself. But I think everybody pretty much can be rehabilitated. So this idea of being deleted, I think, is an extremely rare case. And like I say, I've never seen anything like that happen. But as a possibility, yes. And would the system get rid of bits that were counterproductive? Sure. But would the system rather rehabilitate those bits and get them going back? Sure, that's better. So it's a loving, caring system that is going to do whatever it can do. And I'd say the probability of rehabilitation working and being positive is almost 100%. It's not that hard to rehabilitate. An IUOC that's starting to starting to do worse each time rather than better each time.
How much how much of a downside, how say someone like we've mentioned Hitler, it's just a common reference, so much damage to uh, so many people affected. How does that factor into everything? Or is it simply as you say, it's this one experience that how someone grew up in the experience, how they were affected by their environment. Was any of that from previous lifetimes? And how would that be? How would you rectify that much damage to humanity?
Well, it's just our free will. We have free will. Now, if a person develops a lot of power, political power, military power, power in the sense of ability to affect lots of other people. If a person gains power, they have free will. If they want to do things that are horrible with that power, well, they have the power. They can do horrible things to lots of people. It is just the way it is. That's part of that's part of the game here. We have free will, and there'll be some people will gain power and use their choices to be the king of the hill and to be the 800-pound gorilla, and they will smash everything and everybody that opposes them. And that's a possibility. That's a possibility that can happen here. And it does happen here some. But it used to happen here a lot more than it does now. It used to be 500, 600 years ago, 1,000 years ago, that almost all political entities were warlord entities. That was the mentality, was the warlord mentality, somebody with power who could crush his enemies. And that's the way almost all politics was done 1,000 years ago. And now only half the politics is done that way now. And by politics, I don't mean necessarily countries, but also corporations and bosses and, all kinds of things. Just in general, the choices that people have where they have authority over other people. Your boss can be a monster or your boss can be a great leader, So you just, so it went from almost everybody like that to maybe half the people like that. Get carried away. When they get a little bit of authority, it makes them use it on other people.
But it is something they have to come back from. They
Yeah.
have to very slowly come back from. And that's a downside in that your evolution is slowed down terrifically. You have to climb back up this um, making better choices ladder.
It could be slow depending on how deep, how big a hole you make for yourself. If the hole you make for yourself is deep, then it'll take you a while to get back to where you were. But if it's not, if it was just, wow, that was just a terrible incarnation for me. Boy, I just, everything hit me in the wrong way and I made a lot of really terrible decisions. I see that now and okay, I'm not going to let that happen again. Then even if you did a lot of horrible things, it may not affect you that much. So it just depends on the why you did it, where it came from, how much of it was just your fear running things, just your intellect making choices, how much it was the real you, how much it was the authentic you, how much of it was your image as the big powerful person that could, push people around. That may have been all in your intellect, not really in your being level. You see, so it just depends on the individual case. That's why the system doesn't say, "Oh, Adolf, you've just been a very bad boy. Now you're going to have to do this as punishment. You're going to have to write on the blackboard 15 billion times." Anyway, it's not like that because that isn't helpful. What's helpful is to get people back in the game, evolving the quality of their consciousness. Just punishing people because of vengeance, because you've been bad. We just want to punish you because you deserve to suffer. Well, that's all ego talking.
This is very
That's
interesting because you're speaking to how an individual evolves. You're speaking to the individual realities that we live in and the experiences that we have to deal with. We have to be in charge of how we evolve. How does it translate to the people who were severely damaged by whatever actions the being has taken? Witnessing a parent murdered, all of
most
those types of things. How does that come into play?
Well, a lot of that disappears when you die. Remember the dream evaporates very quickly. Most of the particulars, well, all of the particulars of that disappear. So you don't have particular instances anymore. Oh, I remember, my great great grandfather got run over by, a Neanderthal, and I've really hated Neanderthals ever since. You don't have any of the particulars of what happened anymore. They all fade upon your death. Shortly afterwards, that's gone. Okay, now what remains is things that you took in to yourself at the being level, things that changed you at the being level. And most people who have terrible things happen to them, I don't think it changes them that much at the being level because they know that it wasn't their choice. They just got run over by something bigger than they were. Okay, or their family got run over by something that's bigger than they were. It wasn't like they made a bad choice for this to happen. It's, we're here to evolve by the choices we make. And if you haven't made a really bad choice, but somebody else has, and it ends your life, well, gee, you'll have to start another life. But we look at it and say, oh, that's a horrible deal. I'll be angry forever. That'll change me. I won't be the same person. I'll be really hurt by it forever and ever. Not so. It's not like that. That's just the way you feel now, here. It's your ego and your fear is all wadded up when that happens. But actually, somebody else who had more power, they had a gun and you didn't, they had an army and you didn't, whatever. And okay, terrible things happen, but next time you incarnate, you may have a little something in there that says be careful because big things can run over you, so you may be a little more cautious next time about just putting your stuff out there and not really caring who hears it. You may be a little more cautious and say, well, I really don't like the boss. Instead of just going up and telling the boss that, you may be more cautious next time in what you say. So, and who you say it to, because it might just get you run over. The boss may just throw you in a pit with lions to, see if you can take the food away from the lions, or whether you'll be food for the lions, because that's just the way the boss is. So you'll learn some things and you may be cautious, but you don't go in filled with hate because of some terrible thing that was done with you. That's not likely. You just let that go. It's the way it is. And if this is your 1,000th incarnation, you're perfectly aware that sometimes, what do they say? Sometimes you get the bear and sometimes the bear gets you. If you've had 1,000 incarnations, some of them have been easy, some of them have been wildly successful, some of them you hardly got started before you got run over. You got started, you only made it 5 or 6 years into it and caught a disease and died. Well, okay, you start over again, or something horrible happened to you. You got in the middle of a war and got killed for no particular good reason, but that happens. There's a lot of warring going on out there. So
So really, it's
do it
the
again.
individual, how they deal with whatever it is. And the person doing all of these horrible things that was brought up by this question has to deal with it as well at
Right.
a at a, a lower point and have
They,
to work their way back up because
they
it
have
is all about low entropy.
they have to deal with what they did, and they have to not do that. In other words, it has to not be a part of their IUOC, a part of their consciousness. Now, maybe, let's say they did these evil things, but it all came out of their intellect because they wanted power. They wanted power, so they did this for power and they did that for power. And they were even mean to people because that gave them more power. But at the being level, they may not have been that bad. Their intellect may have taken over and done all that. So when they reincarnate, well, all that's gone, disappeared. There's not a big detriment there. You see, it just depends on the individual, what they did, how they did it. Was it was it just acting out of, making bad choices? Well, there's still a decrement from that. Yes, you have to work your way back out of that, but that's not terribly hard. So, no, there's no punishment in the fact that you were a bad person, so now you have to live in fire and brimstone and be tortured, for so many years. It's not that kind of way. It's we're here to evolve. We're here to grow the quality of our consciousness. And it's not that hard to be rehabilitated after you've done something that's pretty bad. So it's a good system. It's a kind system. It's a loving system. And it's not here to punish people, because the punishment would only make things worse. It's not. It's punishment isn't that helpful. IUOCs are not the same as children. Children sometimes need to be punished. That's helpful for them. They learn. But if you punish too much, you make things worse. So you have to punish to the point that it's helpful, not to the point that it's hurtful. It's better just to take what you've got and start to build on it, because the punishment's there because you've got a life that's got to change. Here you're starting all over in a whole new lifetime. So,
Is this something that the LCS learned? I mean, going back to our origins of consciousness, um, conjecture, conjecture on the origins of consciousness. Um, it appeared to some people that there was a very punishing, vengeful God, and then that turned around as the LCS evolved into a more loving approach that worked better. Is that kind of what you're speaking of there?
sure, the LCS wasn't somehow, born out of nothing at a very low entropy, loving being. You have to earn that. You have to grow. You have to lower your entropy to get to that point. And it had to learn as well. And in its learning process, it learned that using force to make things the way they should be doesn't work. It makes everything worse. And that's, yes, it's the same sort of thing. Pushing people, demanding, and being vengeful is just not helpful in the long run. It doesn't take you to where you want to go. It's just fodder for your ego. I know we did a little. I did a little talk. What, about 3 or 4 months ago, about a situation where uh, there was uh, a couple who were married. There was an affair, and one of the couple got really upset and thought maybe they just couldn't, continue that relationship, and so on. And I pointed out, well, since that couple still really loved each other and would like to whatever, then, forget and forgive is a better process. And there were a certain number of people who wrote in and said, no way, the one who went out and had that illicit affair needs to be punished. They can't just get away scot free and go back to the relationship. They need to be punished. Yeah, so there's a lot of people like that. They have this attitude that vengeance is necessary. Punishment. If somebody causes pain, then you need to cause them pain, maybe twice as much pain, because that'll show them. But that kind of attitude is just part of the negativity. It's part of the fear. It's part of
It
the
also implodes
ego,
on itself, so it
and it
doesn't go
well, it
anywhere.
makes everything worse.
Yeah,
When you do that, you take a situation that's not a good situation and you make it a worse situation.
of course.
So every time you try to fix things with heavy-handed, punishment and fear and vengeance, you don't fix them.
Yeah,
You make them worse. In the big picture, you're taking something that had potential and you destroy it because you want to punish somebody. See, you end up with less, not more. So that kind of an attitude is just not very grown up yet. It's still a very immature, self-centered kind of attitude that, I've been hurt. I want to hurt the person that hurt me. Well, that, you see 6-year-olds that feel that way. That's an immature, it's a very immature idea.
Well, thank you, Tom, for really expanding on that more than I've heard you speak about before on this issue of negative beings. Thank you so much. I hope that is helpful to the person that asked the question.
I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We will continue to post videos for free on my YouTube channel, but please understand, these videos are expensive to produce. They represent many thousands of hours of production and editing, as well as all the necessary audiovisual equipment, computers, and software. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.